Yet another unhappy Honda here. This is a 2007 Honda Accord with a check engine light. So let's plug in the Innova 5610 and see if we can figure out what's going on. Okay, so we have a P2646 rocker arm oil control valve stuck on or off. This has to do with our VTEC system. The Honda has a spool valve or VTEC valve on the back of the engine. This can be either an electrical problem or an oil pressure problem, or the spool valve itself is bad. Now, the first thing we need to do is check the oil. The VTEC system is very sensitive to oil pressure, and so even if you're a little bit low on oil, that can cause an issue. I'm noticing right here on the dash, it says that our oil life is at 5%. Let's check our mileage. So we're at 123,698. Just so happens that they have an oil change sticker. So it looks like they're a little bit past an oil change, 1,300 miles over. So that could be our issue, but let's take a look at our oil level first. Now, if the oil looks good, we'll have to take a look at the connections and further diagnosis, but let's pop the hood and see what's going on. Oh, well, there you go. We're very low on oil. All right. Well, let's take a look and see if we have any major oil leaks. Very little seepage around the valve cover. That's really not that bad. Not enough to be, completely out like that. Now, sometimes the spool valve itself will leak, which is right here. I'm gonna lift the car up and see if we can get a better visual on that. But as of right now, I'm really not seeing any major oil leaks. And this is parked on my driveway overnight. No drips or anything. So, I'm surprised they don't have an oil light on or a low oil warning or anything like that. Now, when diagnosing this code, that is the first thing that you need to check is the oil level. And in this case, we're extremely low, and so that's likely our problem. Now, if your oil is not low, it could also just be really dirty, and or even your filter could be a little bit plugged up and not allowing the proper amount of oil pressure to trigger that oil pressure switch or sensor. All right, I'm just gonna clear the code, take it for a quick test drive, see if that check engine light comes back on or if we have any pending issues with that circuit. I'm thinking it was just the low oil pressure due to low oil. Let's find out. We'll go ahead and erase this. Take it for a quick test drive, see if that comes back on or see if there's any other issues. Make sure we get the RPMs up over 3,000. All of a sudden, it just started bucking a little bit, and now we've got the check engine light on. That's why you got to do a test drive and confirm everything. I would have assumed just the low oil would be enough to cause this to have issues, and even though our oil is now topped off, it's still giving us that issue. It's not happy. See, if you try to go over 3,000 RPMs, it just starts bucking. Could be a malfunction with the spool valve itself, or it could be the screen and that filter plugged up. Let's go ahead and take it off and take a look. All right, so I just loosened up the high pressure power steering line just to move it out of the way so we can get down here. Sometimes this guy right here is pretty helpful. This is a little hose pliers from Gear Wrench. Makes it a little bit easier to undo. There's the one. Other one's right back here. Easy enough. And the connector looks clean. So I don't see any corrosion on our connections on either side. So we're gonna pull this spool valve off. We'll take a look at that screen. Now, if you can see that there's also this little plastic clip that's holding that harness on that little shield, on that little metal shield. Sometimes you can just push in the top and rock it like that. We got that little plastic tab loose. Now there's another one on the other side that's pretty hard to get to. All right, now we can take out the three 10mm bolts that hold this on. It's kind of by feel, but there's just the one here, another one here, and then this one. We can just take those out. Now you're gonna wanna have a little drip pan underneath because this will leak as soon as you take this off. Here's the other snap. Well, if we're careful and maybe a little lucky, we can get the other clip off without breaking it. Got it. And we didn't break it. Let's pull out the old spool valve and take a look. I'm just gonna carefully pull out this O-ring slash filter, and you can see it's really flattened and it's pretty brittle here too. I can feel it's kind of cracking. Well, let's take a look at that. Yeah, it kind of pulled away, separated from that screen. I can still see daylight through this if I hold it up to the light. So I don't know that that necessarily would have created a huge pressure issue. I've seen some that were a lot worse and actually blew out the screen because the pressure, you know, became so great. This is a comparison for you. This is what a new one looks like. Again, you can still see through. If I hold this up to the light, I can still see through that screen. So I don't think it was completely blocked off. Now, the Honda manual has a little bit of a decision tree that you need to go through, and it doesn't actually involve pulling the spool valve out just yet. You should actually go through, test the connections, and then pull off this oil pressure sensor or switch while the spool valve is still on the car, and put in the oil pressure gauge basically to run that, and then test and see if you've got at least 56 PSI. But because this could be a combination of so many things, I talked to the owner about it, and he's in a little bit of a rush, and he just said, you know what, just go ahead and put on a new spool valve, which is what we have right here. So that's going to have a new gasket, a new oil pressure sensor, and of course the new solenoid. The whole thing comes as an assembly together with a new oil change and Honda filter on there. It had a CarQuest oil filter. It also looked like the oil had not been changed. So maybe a combination of dirty oil, this bad screen, even the spool valve. Some people are saying that over 100,000 miles you should go ahead and change it. It really kind of depends on how well the car has been taken care of, you know, if they've been checking and changing the oil frequently. So I talked to the owner about it. He said, let's go ahead and just do the whole thing. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to put this on now with a fresh oil change, and then we'll take it for a drive and see how it does. All right, we got that cleaned up pretty well. Definitely don't want to use any power tools here. You can cross thread stuff. This is what it looks like from up top. You kind of have to just get these bolts started by feel. I like to make sure that they're kind of all tightened equally as well. And a little snug here with the ratchet. Just use a little small ratchet so you don't overdo it. Okay, now the torque spec on this is 104 inch-pounds, which is right around 8 foot-pounds. All right, now we can put back the harness connectors and these little side plastic connectors as well. The one on the side just clicked in place. It was already lined up. And just be cautious on these. Just make sure that those pins line up before you press them in. Nice positive click out of each of these connectors just to make sure that they are in there. Let's put this power steering bracket back on. Probably not necessary to take that off, but it just seemed to make it a little bit easier to film. All right, now we can put the oil in. I already changed the filter and drained out the old oil. And make sure you use the correct oil. This is the 520 that we're using. I just went with the O'Reilly house brand full synthetic 520. Let's go ahead and start this up and see how it does. Sounds good. We're gonna let that warm up. And of course, we're gonna test for leaks on the new valve. All right. Now, since we did change the oil, let's go ahead and reset the oil life on the dash as well. See right there, our oil life is at 5%. Just press and hold this button here. Now you see it's blinking. So take your finger off and press it again. And then it goes back to the odometer and trip odometer. And if we scroll through here, we now have oil life at 100%. Let me go grab the Innova 5610 so we can clear that code, and then we'll take this for a test drive. There you go. Check engine light went off, and now it's rescanning here. And now we have no powertrain DTCs. Now we still have a lot of incomplete monitors because we haven't gone for a drive yet. So we'll go for a test drive, see if we can complete the monitors, and at the same time make sure that this check engine light doesn't come back. Okay, we're getting up in the RPMs here. Oh yeah. That VTEC kicked in perfectly. Definitely wasn't doing that the first time we drove this around. Let's give it another rip here. Oh yeah. Yep, that VTEC's working just like it should. All right, well, we just got back from a nice long test drive. No check engine light. The thing is performing perfectly. It's running exactly like you would want it to. Let's just do a quick scan here and see if those monitors are completed, or at least most of them. We might have an issue with the evap monitor yet, because you usually have to do a warm start and a cold start. But yep, so we still have the evap monitor incomplete, but we were able to complete all of the other monitors, and no powertrain DTCs or freeze frame data presently stored in the vehicle's computer. That's a win. I'm going to call this fixed. Now, I didn't do a full diagnosis on this vehicle in the sense of taking out the pressure switch and checking the oil pressure and a few other things. I kind of took some shortcuts. I realized that. But after discussing things with the owner, he didn't really have the time, and he also didn't want me to spend a lot of time on this. So we both decided that it would make sense to go ahead and put in a new spool valve assembly. Now, if you have this code, the P2646 or the P2647, a lot of the forums and things that I read, including a few videos that I watched, suggest to just go ahead and replace the entire valve assembly, because the deposits and whatnot that build up can get inside the solenoid, get inside those passages. You could spend some time cleaning it up and change the little O-ring with the filter screen and maybe still get this to work. We just didn't want to fuss with it, or didn't really want to take the time to mess with it, so we went ahead and replaced the entire spool valve assembly, complete with the solenoid and the pressure sensor, or the oil pressure switch as Honda calls it. And we went ahead and did a full oil change with a new Honda OEM oil filter. Seems to have fixed our problem. We just don't really know if it was the dirty screen on that spool valve, the bad oil pressure switch or sensor on the spool valve, or just dirty oil and a dirty oil filter. This vehicle is also heading out of state, so I'm not going to be near it in order to change that out again. So he just said, let's just go ahead and do the whole spool valve, which made sense to me. Looks like we've got a happy Honda now, and I'm going to give this back to the owner. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. Now, if you don't have a scan tool, I really would suggest that you buy one. This Innova 5610 is one that I really like, and I use this a lot. I'll get a link in the description where you can pick up this exact same scan tool that I use, along with that spool valve and some of the other parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.